Okay, so these leaves right here,
Yes.
those are not applique-on, those
No.
are pieced.
Those are pieced,
together.
yes. 2 pieces together, make the seam, open it out, put the next seam on.
When people look at this, I'm sure that they wonder if they could possibly do it.
Of course.
People, who can do quilting? What does it take to be a quilter?
Anybody can do quilting, and you can do it any way you want these days. You can do it with a threaded needle in your hand, you can do it with sewing machines, and we have all kinds of sewing machines. We have machines that are now, you connect them to the computer, punch a button, and it will do stuff for you. I don't even know if I said that correctly. I'm not a computer whiz.
And then you have people still doing it in an old-fashioned way.
Exactly.
How do people get into it? If somebody around the states, around Nevada somewhere, maybe living in a little town, wants to get involved, what's the best way?
Well, if they have computers, they can find information forever on a computer. You can get on websites. There's all kinds of information. But it's local people getting together and meeting once a month and learning all the different things and sharing their quilts and whatever. It's a networking situation.
Well, we are so glad that you decided to move to Reno and to live here in the Riverside Lofts. And,
oh, I'm so lucky to be here.
And thank you for taking the time to share some of your work with us. Elsewhere in Nevada, thousands of quilters gather routinely to share their ideas and quilting skills, as we see here at a recent gathering of the Truckee Meadows Quilt Guild.
This is what I came up with, and I figured out how to get the extra color right in there, so in the 9 patch.
And this is made by Sue Gears. She couldn't come today, so she had me to bring it.
It's very utilitarian fabric, utility fabrics, work clothes, and she kind of lost the pattern, but my husband's aunt made it. It's hand-pieced. Her stitching is beautiful, but I just couldn't make myself hand quilt it, so I'm tying it.
It's a paper pieced. It was in the auction, but I made a second one, and I made over $100 too. It made what mine did, so I was really pleased also.
I've always been more into art quilts, and so I decided that it was time for me to get a little bit of training in traditional quilting. So I took a class at Quilt Stop in Log Cabin. This is my first log cabin attempt.
That's the first block. This is the second one. And
this is the block of the month.
Block of the month. And this is the third one.
Upside down.
There we go.
We always think of women being the quilters, but actually on the frontier days it was quite common for men to have to help quilt. There weren't always daughters, and the mother had so many duties that it was quite common for the man or the boys to help. My own grandfather learned how to quilt from his mother, and he passed it on to my mother and her sisters.
Today, this male quilting tradition continues, as with quilter Joe Cunningham of San Francisco. Better known as Joe the Quilter, Joe pays tribute to the art of quilting through his music as well as his hands.
I didn't start out my life to be a quilt maker. I wanted to be a writer. And so I went to college for a year and studied English, and I was going to go back, but the next summer I ended up getting introduced to quilts through a long, crazy series of events, and I got interested in quilts. Averill Colby, an English writer, in the book Quilting, she recounts in a paragraph or so the story of this guy named Joe Headley, who was a tailor. And in the late 1700s, there was the fashion for quilts became so hot that a lot of tailors took up quilt making professionally, and Joe was one of them. And he became known in his town, he was very famous for this, he became known as Joe the Quilter. And I thought that was interesting when I read this. And a few months, and Joe the Quilter, a man who was a professional quilt maker, you know? And a few months later, I decided to become a professional quilt maker. See, maybe if we flipped it over, you can see the snake-like cable in the other border. For you quilt makers out there, what I've been trying to do with all these quilts that I'm showing is to quilt everything freehand. And this is, I wanted to see if I could quilt a cable freehand, the way I think Joe Headley and others of his time quilted without markings. So I decided, yes, you can. So can you see the cable here? Quilted without markings, just freehand quilted. So it makes it kind of wooby, you know? Kind of, oh, I mean, you can see it's natural to quilt this way, and then I'd go that way, and it'd be harder. So my lines go all kind of, and then I got mixed up here in the middle. I made just an absolute mess out of it. And then you can see. So Joe had this story that he wanted to tell about the quilt, but before he got a chance to launch into it, he unfurled the quilt, got quite a reaction, and then somebody in the back, probably Billy, said, "Hey Joe, that's nice. Also, this one here is all freehand, and I wanted to see if I could do freehand feathers. And as you can see, it can be done. No markings, just quilt them." I know your work. At least I saw a shirt you made one time. It didn't really do anything for me, but I know you could do it by later next week. How hard could it be to make me a quilt? Make me a quilt, make it big, but not so big that it drags on the floor, just pretty good size, you know, full size. Make me a quilt, make it nice, but not so nice that you leave it folded up in a drawer somewhere because you never want to use it. What good is that? Make me a quilt, make it thick, but not so thick that you lie under it and sweat and then throw it off on the floor in the middle of the night. That's not what I mean. Just make me a quilt.
Many historical artifacts can be displayed for brief periods only due to damage from air, light, and dust. To preserve their color and vitality, the historic quilts are now tucked safely away from the light's harmful rays. To see photographs of the quilts or learn about textile preservation, visit our website at nevadaculture.org and click on the Marjorie Russell Clothing and Textile Museum in Carson City. Meanwhile, the Quilt Odyssey exhibit focuses next on contemporary quilts through September of 2002 at the Nevada Historical Society in Reno. Besides hosting changing exhibits, Nevada's oldest museum houses a wealth of material on the history of Nevada and the Great Basin, including permanent displays, newspapers, print files, maps, government documents, manuscripts, books, and photographs. Call 775-688-1191 for more information. The state of Nevada operates 6 other museums for the public: the State Museum and the Railroad Museum in Carson City, the East Ely Depot Museum, Lost City Museum on Lake Mead, the State Museum and Historical Society in Las Vegas, and, under development, a tourist railroad operation in Boulder City. For information on these facilities, please visit our website, nevadaculture.org, or contact the Department of Cultural Affairs at 775-687-8393.
Well, make me a quilt. You might as well do it. Make me a quilt.